Okay, and we're live. And so for the first time in about 30 episodes or so, myself, Zach Roberts, will be hosting the show. Dave might join us in a little bit. He's, I believe, furiously driving down the highway trying to join us. I don't know where. I'm not quite sure. But this, if you don't know for some reason, is Around the Lens podcast. We're a weekly roundtable visual journalism show. We've been going strong for over a year now, and you can find all of our information on our social media pages, which I will have as long as I can bring up the page. There it is. If you want to learn more about us, you can head over to aroundthelens.com. Follow us on Facebook at AtL Podcast, on Instagram at Around the Lens, and then on Twitter at A Round Lens. So I'm here with David Wells and Jamie Rose. David, could you start off first and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm David Wells. I'm a photographer and filmmaker based in Providence, Rhode Island. Back in the day, I did newspaper work for a while, actually not far from where you are now.
True.
Did magazine work for many, many years. And the last 5 years, I've been transitioning into doing motion and increasingly film work, which is how you make a living these days, which I think ties in directly with our question of the future of photojournalism.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jamie?
I'm Jamie Rose. I'm happy to say I think this is my third time being on the show.
Yep.
And I'm the co-founder of Momentary Workshops. I was a political and nonprofit photographer for about 10 years in Washington, D.C. And now I live in beautiful Oregon with my business partner, Chris Anderson. And we run Momentary Workshops and Momentary Creative.
Fantastic. I believe you're like the, I'm trying to remember who it is, whether it's Tom Hanks or Alec Baldwin, who has like the most number of hosting gigs on SNL. So you're like our Tom Hanks or Alec Baldwin of the show.
I saw on Instagram today that it's because usually I'm drinking wine and forcing all of the other panelists to drink wine.
Pretty much, yeah. Every episode you've been on, anytime you have an ability to pull in the guests that don't always want to talk, but I think we'll be fine today. Not only because it's just the three of us, but also David's, is always good for talk. So we can dive right in because we've got some topics later on that I think they're gonna give us a little bit of time. I don't know what David, Jamie, are you Nikon or Canon? Or are you something else? Are you Leica? Right?
Yeah,
yes, Leica. Yes, yeah. And David?
I'm also an outlier. I'm an Olympus user.
Oh God. Okay, so I'm the only one that's crying right now at this next topic.
Yeah.
About Nikon stock took a dive, and as David wrote, Nikon stock dropped 15% in one day. Is this a sign of the end times for the camera and lens manufacturer, or just a momentary lapse? I don't know. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Well, I actually did have one. Jamie, you want to go?
Nope.
I mean, I did have one thought, and as I understand, the reason that they took the bath was because they had thought about doing some kind of mirrorless or some kind of non-DSLR camera, and then they changed their mind because of development costs. And the reason that would be relevant from my point of view is because I've been using mirrorless for a long time, and at one point in time I even worked with Olympus as a visionary, promoting their stuff. I don't do that anymore. But for me, the mirrorless cameras have been the entry point for me to do video in a way that was simply not possible a decade ago. And so in terms of our larger question about sort of where photojournalism is going, I think that one of the things that's in our favor is as the tools change, they become more accessible. It's interesting, and I don't know enough about the Nikons, but it's interesting that Nikon didn't seem to understand or figure out a way to get into that market in the same way that certainly Leica and Sony and the Fujis have gotten into it for the mirrorless realm of photography, which is, for people like me, has expanded a whole bunch of opportunities.
Yeah.
So that was my reaction to it. I don't know anything about the economics of it at all.
Yeah. Jamie?
Well, I think in today's marketplace, I mean, any camera manufacturer is going to try to attract new audiences. And if we see, I mean, I'm never really that interested in like, here's our most recent report.
Yeah.
I'd rather see like, what does it look like over the last 12 months and what, you know, research and development innovations have you guys been coming up with that were successful, and what's the long-term success of that? Like, for example, I think if we look at this whole, you know, resurgence of Polaroids or, you know, Polaroid-like things, you know, the instant camera, Fuji just came out with one, Leica came out with one. Yeah. There are going to be a million other people that are going to be coming out with them now. Are they going to all be as successful? Probably not. Are some of them going to come and go? Absolutely. Is the consumer market and, you know, the, like we talked about Snapchat glasses, you know, the last time I was on, like, all of this new ability to kind of attract different generational groups, especially, I think is going to cause a little bit of fluctuation in the marketplace. I think it would be just ridiculous to say like Nikon is definitely going to the dogs. Yeah. They're the third biggest, you know, they're one of the top 3 manufacturers in the world. They are brand recognition up there with Apple and Nike. I mean, I just don't think that it's a harbinger of doom for that company. I think what it's trying to say, and probably what consumers don't recognize as much, is like everybody speaks with their wallet, right? So if we all love Nikon products and Nikon keeps trying to innovate and giving new products out there, and if people keep buying them, then, you know, great, you're speaking with your wallet. You really want to stay with that brand. If we aren't verbally telling them, then we're, you know, better be buying the products that we want to see that continue to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think Nikon's going anywhere.
It'll be interesting though, whether it's a company that evolved, because it has been kind of historically like a pretty good sized company. But it's always been, you know, Canon has a whole other side of things. I mean, I remember somebody when I worked at B&H telling me that basically Canon is able to do anything they want camera wise because they hold one patent on a printer, and that basically makes them almost 80% of their money or something like that. So, but they have an entire kind of world, you know, and Sony has TVs, PlayStation, all this. I mean, I know different divisions, you know, I'm sure that Sony camera isn't in Sony PlayStation division at this point. But Nikon is kind of cameras. I mean, I know they make scopes, which is actually an enormous part of their business, binoculars and stuff like that. Gone to enough NRA shows to see that, like, actually their booth at the NRA convention every year is almost as large as is probably larger than most of the gun manufacturers' booths, which is,
well, and they're really affordable too. I mean, we have Leica scopes in our house, for example. And like they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. But you know, the Nikon scope market has definitely made itself very affordable.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like we're seeing this change in the way that people absorb and use their cameras for different purposes. And I think, you know, this kind of dovetails into like one of the other topics that we're going to talk about today, like which cameras were used for the world press images. Yeah. And I know that David, like, you shoot video. Like, I don't give a damn about video. I mean, I'm glad that the Leica that I have, you know, has the option, but I don't care. Like, I don't shoot video. I don't want to shoot video. And if I'm doing audio, I'm not using my camera for the audio. I'm using an entirely separate audio, you know, system. So we're starting to see this, like, and I can't wait to talk with you guys about it because I know you both do video. Like, it was really kind of nice to see that there was at least like one Leica in the world press, in the world press list of cameras.
I'm genuinely surprised that there's not more. I mean, you know that almost
the price point is not that different between the Mark IV and the new M10.
I mean, they're very different cameras, but I'm just surprised that there's so few, just because, you know, you look at, you know, these photographers and you go, you know, every single one of them probably has a Leica, like, you know, some sort of Leica, even if it's a film or something like that. So that's not like they're completely not introduced to this world. But I did want to, before we jump onto that, because we got other things that we will definitely spend time on that. The one thing that, and I'd be interested.
I just want to say, like, the whole point that I was bringing up was that like we've got cameras that are like digitally uploading to the internet immediately as you take the picture.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm a documentary photographer. I don't need that right away, like, unless I'm Instagramming or something like that. Like, hey, look, I'm with a lion in the jungle or whatever. But like, I don't need that. I don't need all the bells and whistles. And I hope we start to see a segregation of the marketplace where instead of like trying to fire hose, one camera with every single feature that you have, we're starting to see like, these are SLR specific video cameras. And these ones are just for those of you out there who still like to shoot stills. And it'd be nice to see the camera manufacturers other than Leica be embracing that.
But that, I mean, that actually kind of flows into my question as a person who, at least through work, has been able to play with the Canon C100 and the C300 and that whole model DSLR video camera thing, whatever, I don't even, hybrid, whatever it's called, is the fact that Nikon has not, as far as I can tell, and I read Nikon rumors, really explored that world too much. And as a person who would love to just, I would love to just carry around my Nikons and not carry around the JVC camera that I ended up having to buy and all this other, and all the stuff that goes along with that as well. David, I mean, would you explore, or what do you shoot video? What do you shoot video with for the most part?
I actually shoot my videos with OMDs, the Micro Four Thirds. They're not DSLRs because it's a mirrorless camera, but I shoot everything with them, and it's clearly a function of two things. One is my background in photography, understanding lenses, focus, all the stuff that is why some people in the still world are doing very well in the video world. And then the other thing is that it gives me the ability to instantly go back and forth between the two of them. Yeah. And so for and the last one, which is maybe unusual for me, is I'm doing virtually all my stuff as a one-man band. Yeah. I'm doing sound and video. And so for me to be able to carry all of that in one component, I mean, to hear you carrying around two separate cameras would make me like suicidal. So
I hired a camera person and they ended up not showing up at the last shoot, but I had already committed to my, the site that I was writing for, that I was going to do video and still for them, and give them like interviews and a kind of the text video package stuff. And so I literally was like throwing the video camera. Luckily the JVC camera is super small, and it actually breaks down really nicely. But since I didn't bring I have a separate rig. I have a Tascam thing that goes underneath my
DR60.
Yeah, it's the DR60. Yeah,
that's what I use. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I have that. I personally don't like using it, and I've ranted about it before because the battery life is miserable for me. I know there's kind of ways around that, I guess, but it's always been a problem. But I just wish that the size of the D4, like, could we have an XLR mount in there, just like for good sound? Because I mean, I have one of my Nikons, the audio, the headphone audio input is screwed. So I have to I literally have a tape on the top of the camera that says no sound on it. So I know which one I'm grabbing. So when I'm doing audio and doing interviews, because it just gives a high screech noise, it doesn't have anything. So I've literally done interviews with people before, like, just on the fly, nothing like tremendously important, where I grabbed the wrong camera because that's the one that had my 35 millimeter on it, and realized, oh, well, thank God that person didn't say anything important, because all of it is the sound of, what is that horror film, Screamers, right before everybody's head explodes? Scanners? Scanners, yes. I think it is, yeah. So it's literally, that's all that's like, it sounds like grinding metal or something, I don't know, but anyway. No, but it's like, but at this point, it's an ancient, very beat up D600. So I know that could send it to Nikon. I'm sure they'd fix it for cheap, but it'd still be probably $600 to get all that stuff, I would assume. Maybe I'm completely wrong. And so it's literally just not worth it at this point, now that I have a video camera and another DSLR that does it. But anyway, does anyone else have anything to add on this topic? We can move on.
Well, I think we should go to the World Press.
I'm good. It
next.
Flows right in. I like it. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't really understand, like, to be blunt, I wasn't exactly sure why this was a topic for today or why Petapixel even reported on it. I was like, who gives a damn?
What cameras?
What camera was used to take the winning image? I'd be more concerned like, what boots were you wearing?
I mean, that's it's the fun stuff. I like that data. It has nothing to do with anything. Like, but it's like there's another site that actually I haven't done a piece on it yet, but they posted what video cameras are documentary filmmakers using for the award-winning films, which I find that interesting because I just did a full-length documentary film, and I had so many freaking Hollywood type producers telling us, oh, well, you can't use this footage from years ago because it's not 4K. And I'm like, what? I'm like literally watching one of the documentary nominees was filmed mostly on an iPhone. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Because the $5,000, $7,000 video camera that I used back in 2008 isn't good enough, but the iPhone is now. I get the quality, I get the differences, but really?
Well, there's also like, Trouble the Water, the documentary that was done by the amateur filmmakers in the middle of the Ninth Ward as the floods were coming in. It's more about like, where are you as opposed to what are you using? And I think that's like kind of my beef with the whole, like this camera took it doesn't surprise me. World Press has a lot of sports categories. So of course I would expect that you're going to need like the fastest, we're going to need like the fastest Canon and Nikons and stuff like that with the really, really fast lenses and big long zooms and stuff like that. And if you're not going to see like a M9 anymore photographing the Olympics last year. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I think sometimes this is the like funny gear thing where you're right. Like, when are we going to see an iPhone in there? Like, when are we going to start to see the fact that it's not the gear that, is like what everybody obsesses over at this time of, we're like obsessing over technology again when we should be like, look at Annie Flan. Like, are you familiar with Annie Flanagan's work? Annie Flanagan's a documentary film and photographer down in New Orleans, and she's won a number of awards for her coverage of domestic violence over the last couple of years. Oh, yeah. And she uses every medium under the sun. Like, she goes to the antique stores and, buys really crappy point and shoot cameras that have like fogging on the lenses and stuff. And she uses everything from like that to charcoal sketches, I think. And it's like, all right, then now we're talking about, using the technology for as much as you possibly can and trying to stretch all of the different types. And I don't think it should matter if you're using like the latest Canon Mark IV or if you're using the Nikon D12 million or whatever they're up to now.
Well, if I could jump in there, because I think actually, I know Petapixel would never do this. I think World Press might be convinced to do this if we get lucky, which is that Donald Winslow's piece in the New York Times about death of photojournalism, he got to one of my favorite pet issues, which is somebody who's self-employed, the sort of disparity in terms of both hiring the locals, lowering of the quality market, all of that leads into Uber, which I know is another discussion. But to me, the question would be, what was the employment situation of the people who won? Were they freelancers? Were they contractors? Were they on spec? I did a lot of spec when I was very young. I generally don't do stuff on spec because it's generally turned out to be a monstrous money-losing proposition. That would be something that would be really of value. And I suspect it would also point fingers in a direction that some people in the publication end may or may not want to have pointed. Yeah. But that's interesting to me.
I always complain about this because, I mean, I didn't even submit any awards this year, even though I definitely should have, because I think I had a decent year. But I did a lot of interesting things, if nothing else. I was in a lot of interesting places. But it's the fact that, like, I can't compete with not that I can compete with Tyler Hicks. Anyway, let's not say that I'm comparing myself, career, in any way, shape, and form. But the New York Times, I would assume that Tyler isn't paying for his submissions into these, into the, that to me is a huge thing. Submitting a bunch of photos, say, I think we've probably talked to, I don't know if we've talked about like awards before on the show, and specifically saying that I know people set aside $500, $700 or $1,000 for award season. I'm like, well, guess what? I'm not able to do that. I was in December. I was waiting for invoices to come in from earlier in the year, and sitting at home going, I really hope nothing really crazy happens because I literally can't afford to leave the house right now. I mean, I could, but wasn't that bad, but it's like, I don't have like $700 to just toss out there, especially on top of, anything else that I might want to do, like going to a conference or upgrading gear or whatever. I mean, I had my 7200 just crap the bed today, last week. So, that would have been entire award season right there. But that's something that I feel like, I think I saw a listing of who, like where they're from, and a Zuma one, there was only one person from Zuma. And I think about how many photos come out of Zuma Press. I mean, especially considering all that stuff feeds through Zuma too. Right. There's so many smaller wires. So I'm like, dear God. The one thing I will say that I do like about knowing the camera, it's the same way that I like going into an art museum and seeing it's canvas with oil, mixed materials, what was used in the art. I really wish that what I would like to see, not just camera, but speed, the aperture and everything across the board. And that's because that's something I really miss when I go to photography museums, is that none of that stuff is there. Not that I, want to know how to copy, but I want to know how that work was formed. I want to know that it was shot with a 35mm 1.4 with a Nikon D700 at 1.4 and whatever. To me, that's interesting. It helps me think about.
I understand that.
It's the same.
I'm interested in the mechanics of how that person got out there. Were they on contract? Were they on spec? Did they have a real live assignment? Were they holding over after the assignment because they thought there was something more there?
How did you transmit the photo? Like, I know.
Well, because I think, Zach, what you're talking about is that sort of aspiration to excellence that, the one reason why I love like Joe McNally's Hot Shoe Diaries, if you've ever read that book, like it's such a great teaching tool for photographers to be like, look, literally he is giving you down to like the millimeter where you need to put your subject, where you need to put your lights, try it out, test it, and keep trying again and again. I mean, I know it's like the big joke at conferences when you're like, don't ask what lens that person took the photo with when they're up there, showing their portfolio or whatever. But like, I think that's I can understand that. And I know there are a lot of other photographers out there who would like, the dissection of the image itself and how it was taken and where and what the lighting environment was like and things like that. And I, for one, think that would be a way more interesting thing, is like every Monday. Okay, so Petapixel, listen, bring it in, guys. I would like you to get every single #1 World Press image every Monday for the rest of the year and interview them about how they took it, where they took it. And then I'm with you, David. Like, I would love to know the infographic on the World Press winners and who's a freelancer, how many of them are staff, how many of them were commissioned assignments, were people doing them for like long-term documentary projects, were they doing them for daily assignments? Like, that's a really interesting thing, because World Press especially is so exclusive to being published journalists. It's not, Sony World Pictures. This is World Press, and you have to be a member of the press. But I wonder how many of those people were shooting something on spec and then got it published, or if they were, commissioned, or how that actually worked, or even if, like, did it even appear and they just happened to be a journalist? And so, like, I think that there are some really interesting questions, but I have a beef with you, Mr. Robbins, because the thing about contests and fees that people just like get all bitchy about, that makes me so mad, is how do you expect that? This is like the question where people say, like, I would never enter a contest unless I knew that like the best of the best was judging it. Okay.
I wouldn't do that. But
so like, well, people will say, like, I want to know who the judges are, and we have to know who the judges are, and they have to be, like, worthy of my time to submit my image. So how do you expect to get like Amy Vitale off of assignment, fly her to Paris for like a week to look at 5,000 entries, and literally, it's like all day long. If you guys haven't been to one of these judgings, not you guys, like the world out there, they take forever. You have to put those people up in a hotel. You have to feed them. You know, sometimes they are compensated, but I think most of the time they aren't. You have to rent space. You need storage space. You need a web designer who's got to build a website that 5,000 people from around the world with multiple different internet connections can all load up their images. I just don't understand why photographers think that that's free. When we get all angry, not you, I mean in general, like, but we get all angry about like, I can't believe it cost $25. Like, I can't believe that they can get a web designer to do it for the price that they're getting a web designer to do it for, when we won't even walk out the door for less than, you know, $300 a day or whatever.
It's the fact, because, but it's just one of those issues that it's like, if I could submit 10 photos, it'd be great. But they're $50 to $100. I forget how much WordPress is. Like, I was looking at
WordPress is free.
WordPress is free?
WordPress is free, just to be clear. Yeah. I see. That's what and best of journalism is still free. POYI.
Oh, POYI isn't.
Yeah. POYI a couple of years ago, when they split, a couple of years after they split, started charging. Yeah. And now, for example, Alexia is charging, and a number of other ones are charging. So I hear, Jamie, what you're saying. I think what you were talking about before, and I do think this is important. When I used to do freelance for the Philadelphia Inquirer Sunday Magazine, this is a long time ago, because Sunday magazines, but they used to enter on our behalf. Yeah. And that was a substantial amount of money at the end of the year, because they were also doing CA, Communication Arts, and Society of Newspaper Design, and a couple of others. So yeah, it was like $500 to $700 an entry that didn't come out of my pocket, even though I was a freelancer. Yeah. That I also wonder about.
I will retract my statement about WordPress then, because now I'm angry at myself, and rightfully so. Angry at myself.
WordPress spends a lot of effort to make it free, and I think part of their argument is that a number of people who are applying from less developed economies, for lack of a better term, it can really make a difference to be dropping $50 or $75 an entry from any of a number of countries.
So, I mean, like, you know, I mean, there's other ones like PDN, which I know is its own corporate thing, which is completely insane. Their big one is $65 a photo. Yeah. And I think it's like $100 for an essay. I could be completely wrong on the numbers.
No, but I think you're right on those numbers. Yeah.
At least that. Yeah. So I mean, it's like that's high, especially considering their awards are like, it's like $500. Like, the turnaround isn't that much, you know. I mean, like, and it's not like winning the WordPress, or even being, you know, in the third prize or whatever else on WordPress as a whole, to me at least, would be a whole different thing than winning even like the grand prize at PDN. But
I don't know about that.
Really? No, I mean, maybe
I could be wrong. If you go, I go to Photo Plus,
so
that's true. Actually, at Photo Plus, they do a lot of flogging. Though, have you? Maybe I'm getting off topic here, but in terms of contests, have you? I think it's Photo Shelter had a guide a couple years ago to photo contests.
I think I've seen it previously.
Really worth looking at, because they went through and kind of ranked them and said, you know, this is really first rate, the exposure, et cetera, is a gain. This is kind of the middle, and things like that. And I think they put PDN roughly in the middle. WordPress was at the top, both because it's free and the visibility. And I think that's a way of kind of coming at that question as well.
Yeah, no. PDN's always in my mind, because I'm a subscriber and I love the magazine and everything like that. But it's like, the few times I've submitted, it's like, well, there goes $50.
Well, and that comes down to, like, I mean, we talk about this a lot in our business skills workshops. Like, what's the likelihood of actually getting a grant, or actually, you know, like when you're entering into a grant competition, or you're entering into a contest or something like that? Like, and I know that that's like, we don't talk about that in the photojournalism world, like being honest about our talent, because every special snowflake deserves a trophy. But in today's millennial world, but the fact of the matter is, like, I remember one time I applied for this grant. I tell this story in our workshops a lot. Like, I applied for this grant, and I like read about it, and it was something dumb. It was like a $500 grant. I mean, it wasn't like that much money, but put together this whole application, and I was such a bonehead at the time that I didn't even look at like who won the last year until after I had submitted, because it was some random thing, like the Boy Scouts Journalism Award or whatever. I mean, it was nothing to do with photography whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I found out the year prior to me entering my like dinky little photo story that I had done was Dan Rather won it the year before. And the year before that, it was like the entire staff of the Washington Post for their coverage of 9/11 or something.
That stuff frustrates me to no end, though. When it's these small awards that, like, Dan Rather wins a $500 award. Like, what are you talking? Like, where does he's like, well, that's lovely.
Why does he need it?
I'll give that to CBS so they can cover our, steak lunches, whatever. I know they're not, believe me.
But the fact of the matter is, like, I'm an idiot. I never should have applied for that. But yet, there are all these awards. And as somebody who used to run, for 7 years, I think, I ran the White House News Photographer Student Competition.
Yeah.
The prize, this is the prize. The prize was you get $1,000 cash. You got free tickets to come to the Black Tie Gala in Washington, D.C. You got your photos in a traveling gallery show. It was in the book, like the commemorative book that was put together of all the White House winners and everything like that. Like, it was the most crazy basket of prizes you could imagine. And like, I can say, at least for like the first 5 years, we had to beg, plead, and like call up professors at universities, and it was free to enter, mind you, I think. And then it became like maybe $10 or something.
Yeah.
Begging and crying to get people to enter. And we got like maybe 50 entries at maximum any year. And like, there are so many times where people have called me up like, Jamie, can you please promote this on your blog? Because we only got 10 entries for this like $10,000 grant. I was like, what? Are you joking? Photographers are lazy.
Tell me about them. I'll apply for those.
But like, that's the thing. Like, everybody wants to go and get world press. It has prestige in the press.
Yeah.
PDN has exposure to those people. I mean, when you want to talk about the day rates that you want to entice.
Yeah.
Like, of course you want the New York Times, but the day rate's still $200 a day or whatever it is now. And like, at least at PDN, if I'm shooting for L'Oreal, I'm probably making a lot more money than that.
No, that'd be nice. It would be nice to have a commercial shoot every once in a while. But well, speaking of day rates, transitions quite nicely to our next topic. Thank you again, Jamie, for nice transitioning. Honorary co-host for the day. There's a new app, website, whatever, called Snapper. Of course, not with an ER, because God forbid we can't have an app with actual
any kind of spelling.
Yeah. No, it has to be
right.
Yeah. Every PR or whatever is Flickr, everything across the board. It makes it affordable to hire a professional photographer on demand. So you can hire a photographer for, what are the prices here? Kind of terrible. If you want a 30-minute shoot, you just pay $59 to pick, and you pick the best 3 photos. $99 for a 30-minute shoot with unlimited pictures. And this scales all the way up for a full day shoot. And, basically you have to submit 12 hours beforehand. And then the website helps you whittle down the photographer, depending on what style and look and, and what kind of assignment you need. I think I'd argue with the rates because that kind of sucks. But I like the idea. No? Anybody?
Well, different
Sure, it was
people
called
have
Sears
been trying to
Studio.
say again.
I said, sure, it was called Sears Portrait Studio a while ago.
Yeah. There's been people coming at this for a while. Image Rights did it. This Kodak one is not the newest. Blink. I'm assuming you're on Blink.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of people keep trying this. I'm not sure they're going to get.
But Blink is just a networking. It's not an actual Blink is just a database. Or
a database leading to assignments, right? That they're going the next step on this. But before that, what was the one where they would put the description of the photo and then people would shoot it on spec. 5 people would shoot it on spec, and then they would send in their one. Right. There was that one too. Yeah. People have been going at this for a while.
There's I get a I forget if it's from what stock agency. I get an email every couple of days that says, here's what magazines are looking for and here's what their budget are. So basically, if you have the photos already, you can send it in. I actually really like it. The rates are atrociously, it's like, we need photos of a market in Bangladesh around 1985 to 1990, and we're willing to pay $250 for 10 photos. It's usually not that terrible, but often it's like that. It's like that level.
It's pretty close.
Yeah. But it is interesting because, I mean, as a person who doesn't have everything uploaded to the web on a stock page for like the last 20 years, even though I've been shooting for a decade, it is nice to go, oh crap, I have a photo of, Union Square Market in 2009.
You need a photo shelter account.
I need to actually upload to my Getty iStock account for some of the crap that I have in the background. But yeah, I have a Zenfolio account, which I like. I know it's different, but anyway. But yeah, as you were saying, David.
Well, I mean, there have been a number of these over the years, and I'm not sure if any of them have ever taken it off. This one does appear to be different in terms of that price point thing you just ran by. My curiosity more, and this goes directly back to the thing we were talking about a few minutes ago, which is I suspect this is mostly aimed at hiring photographers not in the U.S. and other markets where the cost differential really works in their favor, and there's no chance that somebody's going to send me there or send you there. I think that's...
I believe it's just for local, and it's only set up in certain. It's an Australian-based startup, but I think that they have a couple towns. Yeah, Snapper now. Oh, no, they now live in San Francisco and San Jose, as well as a bunch of Australian cities. I mean, yeah, it's definitely. Yeah.
Wait a minute, the Kodak one, or
no? I'm sorry, Snapper, the app or website that we were with the article that we were discussing.
Yeah, I'm confused. Sorry. I was talking about the Kodak one, which might be the same thing or not. Am I confusing two different things here?
I think it's two different things.
Yeah, I think
the Snapper. I mean, the Snapper one that I found interesting was I always read the comments whenever something like that's posted on like a tech page because I want to know what the public thinks about it as opposed to photographers. And one person wrote on there like, "Oh, I think that like I don't know why I would use this when I can use I think it was called Thumbtack, and
that was another one, right?
Angie's list of." Of providers, but it's everything. It's like I want a personal trainer, I want a photographer, I want something else. And the best comment was somebody went off on this guy who posted this comment on that tech thing you just put up and said like photographers are the most overpaid profession in the world. They don't deserve more than $59 or something like that. Yeah. And this one guy wrote, I mean, obviously like everybody laid into it, but this one guy wrote like, you might think photographers are expensive, but wait until you have an experience with an amateur cheap one. Yeah. And like, I have a very dear friend who got married and she asked me for recommendations for wedding photographers or like to look at portfolios. And I looked at the portfolio of the person that she had hired who was very young and very green. And I said, what's your budget for your whole wedding? And you should take like around 10% for your photographer. Because the flowers die and the dress gets yellow and, the food goes away and you only have the photos left. And so she said, well, I'm sorry, we're having such a huge wedding and I just can't afford $5,000 or whatever for a photographer. So she spent around $1,500. And my present to her was, I will blow up a huge like 16 by 20 photo and print it for you of your favorite image from your wedding.
Yeah.
And I came back to her when like the pictures were posted online and she said, Jamie, I'm really sorry. I don't want to turn down your gift, but I don't like any of our photos well enough to hang it on my wall.
Oh.
And it was crushing because and I hate to be the I told you so.
Yeah.
I was like, girl, you really should have gone with a better professional. And I mean, I've seen this happen so many times in the wedding industry that it's only a matter of time, obviously, before this kind of idiocy like transitions into other genres like what we're seeing here. And it sounds to me like this is please come take my senior portrait, with Snapper or come and take my kid's birthday party for $60 or something like that. And do I think that every kid's birthday party should be a $1,500 affair that you photograph? Like, no. Do I think that we could probably find a little bit better price point than 60? I mean, if that's a split, 50-50 split between the photographer and the organization, dear God, I mean, maybe it's a 50-50. It's like $30 to go out for an hour and shoot. That seems like it's very low.
Oh, we don't like to boast, but here are some of the brands our photographers have worked for: Groupon, Google, Uber, News Corp, Vice, Red Bull. It's like, okay, yeah, no, I'm sure you have those people. It's like I said, I mean, I like the idea. I guess to an I'm literally getting a pop-up window while I'm at the website. What kind of photographer are you looking for?
Right.
I actually am kind of interested if we go live and just have this conversation with this poor person who's probably not based in the US, like having a conversation of what photographer I'm looking for. Like somebody who's hired, probably making by far less money than even what they're putting on here. But I mean, I like the idea of having a place where people can, I don't have to, if I just upload it and I could say no, and be like, oh, no, I'm not doing that for that rate, or I have a day off or whatever. But again, the rates are just terrible, you know?
Well, I think that thumbtack thing was interesting because I did do the whole like questions. I was like, what are you looking for? I was like, I'm looking for a photographer. In what state? Oregon. I'm looking for, you know, and I went through the whole thing and it got to the end and I said I wanted like headshots for, you know, I only wanted 3 headshots with minimal retouching. And then it asked me, what's your price range? Yeah. Like 100 to 150, 200 to 3 to 4, 1,000, whatever. And then it sounded like you submit that bid out into the world and then their database of people can like come back with their portfolio. That's kind of cool. I mean, that's access to a market, an audience group that a lot of photojournalists, I think, wouldn't necessarily be able to access. So
are you talking about Thumbtack or Snapper? I'm sorry, I lost track of
Thumbtack, not Snapper.
Yeah,
I didn't dive into Snapper too much because it just seemed like that just seemed cruel with the first rate.
Yeah.
That's $60.
Because the reason I'm asking about Thumbtack is that I'm on the other end of the Thumbtack stream for video and still assignments in the New England area where I live.
Oh yeah, do you like it?
It's pretty. There are a lot of low balls. So it's mostly low balling. And then the other thing though is the way that Thumbtack makes some money is I have to buy credits to then bid on the job. So that's actually how Thumbtack makes their money. They're not taking a piece, which is actually, as a business, it's very smart because they don't get involved in taking a commission. But I have to buy, I can't remember the exact phrase, but I have to buy these things. They're $5 each. And every time I make a bid, I'm down $5. And so that's how they're making their money. And so I haven't done that much.
Game theory right there.
Because, yes, as a matter of fact. So So that's how they're making money. And so the connection is that I mostly look and see, and if there's one that looks like it'll fit schedule-wise, price-wise, et cetera, then I'll pursue it further. But it tends to be a lot of really low-ball markets because of that last question of how much are you willing to pay?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to like bid over what, if I put in like $150 as my limit, are you allowed to come back and say, well, I would do it for 300?
I mean, you can write that in there, but apparently that they sort of, then it's going to put you at the bottom of the queue from what I've seen. I haven't done a lot of them. So the other one before.
It's an interesting marketplace.
Say again?
It's an interesting marketplace.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so used to only competing with like, you know, the whim of a photo editor.
Right.
And this is actually like putting power in the buyer's hands, which could be, I mean, I went to go get engagement portrait quotes one time, and like the lowest one I could find for an hour was $500.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay, I get it. Like, I totally get it. You're really talented. Yeah. But like, I don't even care that much about this. I'm just doing it for my mom. You know? But again, like I wouldn't go out and find a $60 person and be like, I want to pick the best 3 from your hour that you do and hope that I'm going to get something nice.
See, this is where I've always joked that if, I always say, God forbid, if I ever get married, what I'm going to do instead of spending the like $5,000 or whatever on 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 a photographer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy like 10 used DSLRs with a couple lenses rented or something like that, and just put them on the tables, because I know like half the people who would come to my wedding are all professional photographers. So I would literally just be like, yep, this will be covered, and then that'll be part of my gift
right now.
I just leave the memory cards, and somebody at the table can take the camera as a gift.
Every wedding photographer out there is like, this is why I hate other photographers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So sort of on the topic, but a little bit, you saw the link that I just sent through on the chat message?
Yep.
Because this is something Kodak is starting called Kodak It. I don't know if you've read about this or not.
I have not, no.
It's a little bit different, but not much. It's still basically another one of these lowballing services, and I don't know anything about who is behind it, but they're obviously tied up with Kodak. I can't imagine Kodak really is involved. I'm sure somebody basically went to them and said, you've got this incredible brand name. We're going to set up this business of linking photographers and clients and taking a piece, not surprisingly. Yeah. And so misses something in the notes, and I apologize, but I actually thought we were here to talk about Kodak rather than Snapper. Though looking around Snapper, I can see, like, well, I'm on their site. They just sent me a $10 off coupon. So instead of being $59, some poor slob's only going to get $49, but then there's going to be a piece cut in for the company. So
I wonder what the cut is. But with like Uber and Lyft, my understanding is, because I've talked to a bunch of them, is that the company actually covers that cost. They're still getting paid that, even if you have some sort of discount code. So if that's the same way, so I mean, if that's the same way, then I'm not too worried that a company's covering part of my costs. Okay, that's the way coupons work, for the most part, or gift certificates, or whatever, things like that.
This is I'm just going to segue into the Don Winslow and PPA thing here for a second, because this is the thing. Like, people are so pissed off about, like, oh my God, I can't believe. I mean, what is it? Did they say like you get unlimited images for $100? Is that right? For Snapper?
Yeah, I think it was, or maybe a little bit more than that.
So like, what's the difference between doing a 2-hour shoot for Snapper for $200 or doing a 4.5-hour long shoot for AP or the New York Times, where they have the ability to ask for more edits and stuff like that? I mean, people get all like offended that an individual. And John Harrington said this at one point to me. It was like, why is it that you feel totally okay charging somebody like $5,000 a day for a wedding, and you'll work for the New York Times for like $250 a day? Like,
and you
feel okay charging an individual this exorbitant amount of money, not the New York Times that has like way more money than that individual? And it's a genuinely good question, and I appreciate the fact that that's part of the conundrum that we're in. But like, how can everyone like, scream in their outrage of how much money this thing Snapper is going to be charging when, like, the day rates are? I'm so excited about Greg Kendallball's survey. If you guys haven't seen the follow-up to this, like, hop over to my Facebook page, it's public. And Greg is doing a survey in response to the New York Times Lens blog discussion. Jack, do you want to explain it?
About the survey?
No, about the actual articles themselves.
In response to the Don Winslow piece?
Yeah, so like, there was the Don Winslow piece came out from the New York Times Lens blog last week, and it makes a whole bunch of waves, and everybody starts talking about it. And then on Friday, I think, there was a response from a New York Times staffer who like trots into James Estrin's office and says,
you'll have to do, because I saw a discussion about that discussion, but this is how like circle jerk meta this discussion has become, because I mean, this was published on the 15th, the original New York Times interview with Don Winslow, and it is now the 20th as we're talking, and I have seen no less than 5 responses from different places, which seem to be responses to responses to responses at this point. So I'm not even sure what we're talking about.
Okay,
now.
so Don Winslow is retiring from running News
that
Photographer
is,
magazine.
right.
And he does this interview about like the uncertain future of photojournalism. And he basically is like just the most amazingly honest Q&A with James Estrin. So this happens. Then a New York Times young female staff photographer comes into his office and says, this is getting a lot of buzz, and I feel like this is like doom and gloom that's unnecessary. So I want to, go on the record that I don't think it's nearly as bad as what, everyone's saying out there. So then they published the second one. So Greg Kendall Ball this morning, yesterday, I don't know, sometime on Facebook, posted a survey, and he was like, all right, fine. Maybe it's not all bad and maybe it's not all great. I want to know literally, what is everybody getting paid out there?
Yeah.
And what are you willing to work for? And what's the reality of it today? And the funny thing is, like, everybody tries, like, brands try to do this every year. Like, the state of the industry from Photo Shelter, that report that they do every year. And Live Books has done it, I think, in the past and stuff like that. This is just a, like, group of photographers that said, we're going to make it public when we get enough responses. I think they're up to like 700 responses right now. Mm-hmm. And it's growing and it's awesome. And I feel like this is the honesty that we need in this industry. Like, it shocks me that when I started working in Washington, D.C. and I got a contract and I tried to ask another photographer who had been freelancing for this group for a while, how much are they paying you? Because this seems really low to me. He would not tell me at all. He was like, oh, I don't discuss how much I get paid by anyone. And I was like, well, how do you expect me to hold out for the right amount of money if you're not even going to tell me that, you're getting paid $300 a day and they just offered me $200. And then if I take that $200, then I've just lowballed you and I don't even know it.
So you work in a retail store. This is something I continually rant about on this show. I probably at least once an episode, there's some like rant about me talking about how no one wants to talk about this. But you work in retail, like you get a job in retail and they tell you immediately, please don't discuss what you're getting paid. But there's actually federally protected. You can talk about what you get paid. And we talk about it all the hell time. I mean, we never say, well, I get $725 versus your. It's always like, there's a little bit of rounding maybe or discussion or something. But like people are relatively honest about it because it's the only way, we'll never unionize the Barnes & Noble bookstore that I used to work at, even though I tried. But there's a way of like at least heightening it. But I think I have two or three photographers that I know of that I can call up and say, hey, I know you work for this place. How much do you make? Obviously not because I'm trying to undercut you, but because I don't want to undercut you. And I actually had one of my friends who, out of the blue, she's like, I'm looking for a place to pitch this. And I was like, oh, pitch to this place. I work here a lot. And she immediately asked me, how much do you ask for? I don't want to do this. And I'm like, here's what I usually get paid. I gave her a range of what I've gotten paid from this place for different assignments. And then she came back at me and said, here's what their counter offer. And we had a full discussion about it. And I was like, well, that's fantastic because now there's only me and her, the only two photographers who work for this lefty news site. And so now we control the place. And this is not the only place that we did the same thing to as well. And it's like, obviously I know I don't think we'll ever get a photojournalist union, but I feel like this will be the only way that we can possibly even do this. Well, there's no way. I mean,
you can't by law. The Fourth Estate is not allowed to unionize because if the newspapers went on strike, we would literally shut down the world.
No, but there's half the publications are unionized. There's NW.
There's a difference between like an individual union and the like national union. Like Teamsters versus the Associated Press union that they have, which is their collective bargaining. But the fact of the matter is, like, this is why Momenta focuses, 50% of our teaching on business skills. Like, and yeah, there is a big difference, I think, in this industry because it is a creative. And David, tell me if you agree with me on this, but like, there's experience, there's creativity, and there's, there's something that is invaluable in that experience and in that creativity. And there are certain photographers that are just better than other ones, especially at doing different types of skills. But I think that when we're talking about day rates at newspapers and photojournalism that is, kind of systematically priced, because the New York Times pays this much money and the Time magazine pays this much money and the LA Times pays this much money. Like, we should know that. We should be able to say, like, all right, that's cool. If we all agree to it, then we'll all agree to it and we'll say that this is acceptable. But like, somebody asked me, go ahead, dude. Sorry.
Well, that was basically what happened with editorial photo and EP. And it worked for a while, but I mean, I don't do any work for the Times, partly because of the contract and partly because of the day rate. And I haven't for decades. And maybe once every year or so they'll call me and, 2 sentences into the conversation, we get to the contract and then the conversation ends there. I don't even get to the money point. But I'm going to look at this survey after we're done, but I think the problem is simply that it was interesting because I was reading the New York Times thing and thinking to myself, but the number one perpetrator of the problem that Don Winslow is talking about is the New York Times. I mean, they spend this money on their staffers and they're doing all this stuff on 360 and all that, which is lovely. But in terms of the day-to-day thing that actually goes into that thing, especially the print and the website, it's, they haven't raised day rates in ages and their contract is to me untenable. And until they come around to it, to a different vision, which I don't think they're going to do because they can always get new supply of bodies. That was the most interesting thing that Winslow was saying to me, was actually saying the words out loud, that it's really about continually finding new bodies in those other places and not really caring who's on the other end. And it was great. And it was just depressing as hell to hear him say it, but it was really great to hear him say it because that's the change that as a self-employed photographer for 30 odd years, I've lived through. I used to get sent places because the locals, not to judge them, but didn't have the skill set. Their skill set has gone up enough. The technology has gotten to the point where it's reasonably good. And then the third variable there is the publications have lowered their standards so much. And that's what he was talking about. He was talking about that when those three meet, that's what you end up with what he was talking about. And I think the New York Times is just sort of the most, because they're so prevalent in the journalism world, they're the forefront of that. And I think they're more guilty than everybody else. But the other magazines are just about as bad. And I don't actually see a solution. The woman who came in, I did read the piece about the young woman who came in from the New York Times to say it's not all that bad. She had half a point, which is that she has a number of skills, not just still shooting, but video and all of the more contemporary skill sets, which is the argument, I think, for her doing reasonably well. And I'm trying to get those skill sets as fast as I can, but I don't think that's going to really address everything. And the other thing is I don't know if is she a staffer or a contractor? She has a more...
I think she's a staffer.
Okay, so she has a more substantive and dependable relationship with them than the rest of
that
us.
Was the argument that I saw on Facebook. Everyone was saying, like, it's really difficult for a staff photographer to talk about what it's like out there for a freelancer.
Yeah, that's correct.
And at the same time, I mean, I think the reality of the media marketplace right now is, we gave a lecture like in 2002 or 3 at the Northern Short course, and there were 3 young photographers that were chosen to talk about like how we broke into the industry. And one of them was John Christopher Anderson, the co-founder of Momenta, also my husband.
Plug, right.
And he was a young editor at National Geographic, and he was a photo editor, and he did his part of the lecture was called "Careerism is Dead." And if you know my husband, that's like a really like totally normal thing for him to say. And his point was, this idea of like the gold watch at the end of your 50 year, 40 years, 30 years, whatever at an organization is just not feasible anymore in the newspaper industry. But at the same time, if you want to stay at that newspaper, or if you want to stay desirable to clients in general, there's no more brutal, honest critique of your work than being a freelancer, because the the editors out there are just gonna be like, I don't like your work well enough to hire you for this, sorry. And, or I don't think you're better than the person next to you. And in the careerism is dead point of view, like, yeah, you have to learn audio, you have to learn video, but not only that, like, we just hired a new researcher today, this past year, and his name's Emmanuel Echevarri, and he's lovely. And we just had this conversation this morning about the integration of social media platforms in the marketing for Momenta. And he was like, yeah, I was reading about the Snapchat IPO today. And I was like, I want to reach to the phone and hug you, because it's not about like what Snapchat can do for our brand. It's more about like, how viable is it that we put a ton of energy into Snapchat with their IPO? Are they actually going to be around 2 years from now? Do we want to put the R&D into making products for it? Like, is Facebook Live equally as important as that? And he is keeping his finger on the pulse of all of the different metrics that we need to be looking at for our marketing purposes. That makes him incredibly valuable to me. He read that on his own time. He wasn't paid to go out and like, can you please research the IPO history of, Snapchat? It was actually him showing initiative. And I think that that's what photographers need to be doing across the board right now. Like, you were willing to, you got stabbed in the back by some disreputable photographer, Zach, who didn't show up for his assignment. You still brought your camera, you still brought your video, you figured out a way to do it in a really good way to make the client happy. And, it sucked, but at least you showed the professionalism that's necessary. And I think the complaining that goes on the industry in a lot of different ways, though, comes down to, like, are you trying harder than the next person?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, it's interesting because, we have, and I promise I won't let this drift into politics, but we have this entire, because I did this beforehand, but we have this entire conversation. No, but
promised me you're not going to talk
but
about
it's so, but the problem is that it just works within our conversation. We have supposedly an entire election that was decided by people, white flyover country, middle class, lower middle class, whatever stats you want to talk about, who basically their jobs.
Watch yourself.
I'm from upstate New York. I'm just as much Rust Belt as you. We just didn't even have the industry at all. But is that they basically, it's like, well, coal's going away. And it's like, I think that a lot of millennials are going, I'm 25 years old, or I'm 35, and I've learned how to do photo. I started out doing photo. I learned how to do writing better. I became a professional researcher. I then learned video editing. I now am teaching myself how to do podcasts. I'm on my third podcast that I do now, which is not just a skill set that I'm doing, but I also am now, this is, self-marketing, whatever, brand building, whatever crap that you want to call it. And I also am doing the same. I subscribe to Wired magazine, so I know about the tech blogs, about the IPO. I'm wondering that myself, because Snapchat is one of the few places that I just don't understand it. I literally had conversations with my 15-year-old sister about this. Like, just explain it to me. Why is this a thing? Like, why do you pay attention? Like, how do you get news off of it? And trying to figure it out. And she's like, I just talked to my friends on it, so I can't really help you. But and I feel like photojournalists are really, really at the forefront of the, evolve or die sort of industry, and it's like coal and, in industry, you've had this time, and there's arguments. I've done interviews with tons of the president's supporters who say, well, I don't want to go back to education. I don't want to get more education. I want industry. I want this to come along. And I'm going, I literally, from the moment that I started in the business in 2006 is when I really started in journalism. There has not been a 6-month period where I did not have to learn a major new skill set, whether that be social media, whether that be WordPress, whether that be, the one thing I've hold off on is I still don't know anything about coding. And if anybody forces that on me, I swear to God. Yes, David, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm going to send a link for, I don't know if the links I send, do they end up for the audience, or they only end up between the three of us? But I wrote a blog about
I'll post, don't worry, I'll post everything on the show notes.
I wrote a blog about that. And basically my point was that you said 2006. I'm going to go back to 1983 when I became a freelancer. You know, I could run through color negative, color slides. It's been continuing. And the thing that I found frustrating about the election, I don't want to get an election per se, but nobody's offered to make photography great again.
Yeah.
I mean,
so didn't somebody make that hat though? Somebody make photo great again. I think that hat exists. By the way,
is the model for creative destruction, if you know the term.
Yeah.
The economist term, creative destruction. My entire career has been creative destruction, and it's been adapt or die. And that a sector of the population in any political part of the spectrum expects that somehow they're going to be exempted from creative destruction, separate of anything else, it's just absurd. I mean, forget it. They're not going to bring coal back. All this stuff, they're not going to take industry back upstate New York. And so I'd love it if they give me subsidies and you know, raise day rates to contemporary figures and all this other stuff. That would be making America great again in my eyes, but it ain't happening. So
it was interesting throughout this entire year where that entire conversation's happening throughout the election, and you have all these people in media talking about it, but never once I heard anyone ever say, yeah, no, it's just like our industry. And for some reason, media always gets treated like it's not a respectable industry. Like it's an industry that isn't comparable to coal mining or building cars or anything. Mm-hmm. And it's always fascinated me because we can't, you know, like most of the media, I'm the complete opposite. I love talking about my own work. I love talking about media. I love talking about it. I'm like, I always coined myself as I always wanted to be the first gonzo photojournalist because I grew up on Hunter Thompson is the reason I got into photojournalism to begin with, or journalism to begin with. But it's interesting that we don't talk about our industry or we're not even allowed really to talk about in the mainstream rest of the public, like on our media sources, we're not able to talk about our industry the way that, you know, every other industry has talked about it. I mean, like, you know,
this is part of the problem with the guy who wrote on that blog post, you know, like photographers are, you know, one of the most overpaid people. Like it's because photographers truly photographers love talking about themselves, their art and the profession. We just only do it with ourselves.
Yeah. You put a Google camera on it. They shut right up. I can tell you by doing this show, trying to get, that's why I love having you two as guests, is that like trying to have people talk about their industry. And I mean, I don't even get into the pay at all. Don't even get into that, but like trying to get people to talk and not even criticize, but, you know, critique or do anything. It's unbelievable.
Well, I can't believe I'm actually going to engage you in this political example. But the fact of the matter is if we're going to talk about like, okay, I can't believe that this person won, even though, you know, popular vote or whatever. And people are like, the media stole it or Facebook stole the election or whatever. I'm like, no, who stole the election? The people who supported a candidate who didn't get off their ass and go vote for him.
Yep.
Like in the swing states, especially in the states that had the electoral college votes, like that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at a group of people who are like, how should I vote today? Yeah. And then they're upset about the way that, you know, the election results came out, or the people who are really passionate about it and didn't go and get that person off the couch to go vote for their candidate. Like that's how the democratic process works. And it's the same thing when it comes to, I'm really angry I didn't get that job.
Yeah.
Are you as qualified as that person? Are you trying as hard as that person?
Oh, did you actually do what it needs to be done?
There's a job out there and then people are like, I can't believe the job is requiring social media. I can't believe I have to blog and tweet and Instaface all the time about everything that I do. Like, okay, that's just the way it is. So either you can figure out a way to do it really well. That's why there's Hootsuite, or, you know, you can complain about it and then, you know, be angry that other people are getting that job. But like the pursuit of excellence in storytelling and communicating, which is what we do. Like, I don't know why people wouldn't be enthusiastic about embracing these new ways of telling stories. Yeah. Like we can complain all we want, but I mean, this is an information age that is exceptional. I mean, our cameras are so good on our phones that people are being told not to use peace signs anymore because you can get the fingerprints off of them. Yeah. Like that's incredible. We should be so enthusiastically wondering, how can I make this work for me? And that's the difference between journalism, I feel like, and a more competitive industry out there. Like you look at Silicon Valley and they're constantly asking the question, how can we do it better? How can we do it different? How can we be disruptive? How can we find a way that makes those things that everybody complains about a little bit easier? Like I can't find a cab in Washington, D.C. Like, oh, we should just do ride sharing. Like there's a reason why this stuff took off so much, because there's creative thought to pressuring yourself into excellence. And if you don't get off of the couch and do like what you guys are doing, you're learning video, you're learning audio, you're learning, you're being a resource like David and telling people about how it is that they can learn how to be better. I mean, that's how you win the election of the photographic, pinnacle that you're looking for, is like getting off the couch and being a little bit better. So that's my rant. There you go.
I love that you brought that full circle right around. You used a metaphor correctly. Good job.
That's the lit major in me. There you go.
the only thing I would want to jump on there is that in Silicon Valley they have a much better understanding of the incentive system.
Yeah.
Their incentive system is, well, we live in the New York Times is the model of this. We live in a culture of journalism where the incentive system is skewed by this idea of the Times being the best place, and so we'll throw that incentive system, which works so well in Silicon Valley, which is money. Yeah. Either the belief the getting of the money, or the belief you will get the money if your idea takes off. That's the core of Silicon Valley. They do it for one reason. It's good they do it, and I love the technology. I use it, but they do it for the money. They're what's called a profit-oriented business. We have our mix of a mission-oriented business and a profit-oriented business. And the New York Times is the model of people who exploit that idea of the mission. And so while I understand your route and your analogy, and I completely agree in terms of the political process, the problem is that journalism is a mission for people as well as a business. And as long as you conflate those two, I'm not sure where it's going, and I'm not sure it's going to be as good as Silicon Valley, because they have a clearer route.
And this is why I feel like, the world press thing, jumping back in the conversation, like you said, Zach, like, I wish I knew it was free, because I feel like that's more prestigious. Like, why would we all put our eggs in one New York Times basket?
Oh, yeah.
That's not the end all be all of storytelling. I mean, you found, this crazy lefty liberal thing that you and your friends are making money off of, that you believe in.
They pay me more than the Village Voice does. And since I was a kid, the Village Voice was the place I always wanted to work for. And now I go, I can't afford to.
Well, and it's, the Village Voice went corporate. And so that, that stopped being an independent, owned organization and became a large corporate organization, and they've changed the way that they monetize themselves. And so my question would be, is like, where's the next Village Voice? Where's the next Adbusters? Where's the next, creative expression that we can look to that will provide the incentives that David is talking about? Yeah. I mean, everybody's clamoring for world press. Everybody's clamoring to be in the New York Times. And I speak, like I benefited from, and I, totally stand behind my work that I did with the New York Times. I absolutely love the work that I did there, and I still see benefit from it. Thank you, all of you senators that continually keep doing stupid stuff. Anthony Weiner. I have a lovely pair of boots thanks to him. And like the resale value of it was really great. And I really appreciate that contract because of the resale that I get off of it. But like, that's just one publication. And that's why, I have my stock work with Aurora, and I have, different ways to monetize that so that all those eggs aren't in one basket. And I think that if we as an industry can start embracing the fact that like some of these other organizations are equally as reputable and desirable as the New York Times, the ones that pay really well and that allow you the freedom of expression and creativity that we want, like that's when we can start elevating some of this stuff up in the conversation, as opposed to just being like, we're all trying for the same thing and it's not working.
I continually, because like I have a lot of friends who just come at me like, what are the reliable activist friends? Like, what are the reliable publications, websites, whatever to go to? And I'm like, you need to stop thinking in that mindset, You need to start thinking in what are the reliable journalists to go to. The Washington Post overall is fantastic. There's a ton of terrible people that work there. Dave Weigel, he's a friend. He's fantastic. I rely, if he writes something, I believe it. I believe it. It's true. And as a professional researcher I've made probably more money researching than I've made in photography. I hate to admit that, but that's complete thing. BuzzFeed. My friend Jason Leopold, he's known as a FOIA terrorist. He's the number 2 FOIA, has the second amount of FOIAs of ever, Freedom of Information Act, in the country. Like literally the FBI has cited him as a FOIA terrorist because he continually does this. Like they just hired him. Do I trust BuzzFeed as a complete news source across the board? They also do, listicles about, what Disney character you are, but that's the way they pay for those things. So, but it's the same thing, whether it be Common Dreams or The Nation. There's Eric Alterman. I would throw him under the bus if I had the opportunity to. But I have a long-standing gripe with him. But over at The Nation, I've got 3 or 4 friends that write there all the time. So I think we need to start looking at this whole industry in a way that, I think the tech industry maybe even looks at it the way is that there's people, we will look for a place and then we kind of need to just rely on, well, so-and-so works there now. That's a place that I'm going to go to, or, I don't know. I think we need to start kind of looking at it in a slightly different way than going, we're willing to work for cheaper or for free. How many places, I'm sure everybody's gotten, well, it'll give you great attention and it'll give you great, exposure. And, people die of exposure. That's literally the joke I've always heard. That's awesome. Like people don't live on exposure. You can't pay your rent, you die of it. But, but
it's that education thing. Like I remember when the wedding industry came out, I think it was, I can't remember who did that blog post where somebody, some angry bride wrote how dare you charge this much? And she turned around and said, okay, I'm going to break it down for you. And the cost of entry right now with video especially is just, it's exceptional. I mean, the computers themselves are expensive. Then we're talking about the storage. Then we're talking about, the cameras and the lenses and the, support gear that we need. And then the travel and all of that other stuff. I mean, it is incredibly expensive to have a profession in general, but I don't think people understand that because they're not being educated by the journalists themselves. And sometimes, even the upper echelons of newspapers don't recognize how much it costs to get through that barrier of entry into this industry. And so if we can start speaking more, and this is why I'm just so enthusiastic about Greg's survey, let's talk about salaries. Let's talk about what we're being, what everyone's being paid. Let's put it out there and let's let people know that, if you have a problem with a contract, let's talk about what's wrong with the contract. Let's educate people on how to read contracts. Let's educate people on how to negotiate them. And let's stop all just stabbing ourselves in the back. One of the things John Harrington, you can say what you want about his personality. That man has that costing on his website. His pricing is out there for the whole world to see. And he's written 4 books trying to educate other photographers. Stop being pissed at me because I get to charge $3,000 a day and just learn how to do it yourself.
Well, sorry if I'm cutting you. There's a great site. I put it in the chat and I'll put it in the show notes. Writers have done it. And it's actually friends of mine put this together. Originally, it started as a Tumblr site. whopayswriters.com, and you literally go to it and you can go, oh, the Atlantic, they pay, I'm not making this up, I'm not literally looking at it right at the moment, 75 cents per word. They pay, this place pays, Al Jazeera English, it says, here's direct experiences. I got paid 75 cents for a 500-word essay, and here's what it was about. So that it actually gives kind of a breakdown description, because obviously my experience photographing an event is not going to be the same experience that you might have covering a different event. There's no, if you live in Washington, Washington, you're covering an event in Washington, you're going to charge a certain rate because you're right down the road from the event. If they want me to cover an event in, Idaho, it's going to cost me a different rate as well. So, but this site actually does a really great thing. I forget if I know I've seen a kind of a Tumblr as well about photojournalism. It's not as well formatted or put together as this, but I think that this is one of the ways that we could at least start going, so that we don't have to, even if we don't have the conversations, and everything on this site, whopayswriters.com is it's private to the public. Like, your name is not attached to, oh, well, I made this much money. It is just, like Al Jazeera English has 3 different people ranging from 25 cents a word for a 1,000-word piece to $1.07 a word for a 375-word piece. So, you have a range, and at least you have a vague idea of where you're going. I mean, I think that would be a great place to at least start going, as opposed to sites like Snapper.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, the poor Snapper people out there, the people who are working for Snapper are, getting hosed in a lot of different ways, but who knows, maybe it's working out really well for them and they're doing great.
See, the thing is, though, they're waiting for their IPO. They're waiting for their IPO to happen. It's the same thing with the Snapchat people. It's like they stuck around. I'm sure that they're paid well. They have I'm sure there's a great office that they're working in, because every single Silicon Valley seems to have a great office. But even though my sister works at Forbes, and she's continually complaining. I'm sorry, Natalie, for outing you on this. Continually complaining about the open office platform that they have, because she's trying to do interviews with people and then having the next person. But anyway, rants about it. Either Jamie or David, did you have one thing? We're gonna probably round up now that we've got long past our usual time. So
I mean, I completely agree with something Jamie said. I have to say, though, my virtual career was built around not going for major markets. I mean, the bulk of my photo essay experience is actually built in the Philadelphia Inquirer Sunday magazine. That's where I did most of the projects I'm most known for. And I mentioned that because it was a very explicit choice of slightly lower pay, but infinitely more autonomy, and frankly, much better people, many of whom went on to Geographic and stuff like that. And so given a choice between working for the New York Times, where you're under the thumb, or where Philadelphia, where they really trusted me, I did that. And now I'm trying to do the same model in Rhode Island, where I live, which is obviously a much smaller market. But I don't, for example, as I said, do work for the Times. But the concern is that to date, that obsession on this sort of center of the world of journalism being the Washington Post, New York Times. Like when I moved to Rhode Island, the Globe was a much bigger player than it is now, for example. Mm-hmm. And so the hope was that somehow that would be something that would enable the work I was doing to still be of interest and draw attention. To date, frankly, it hasn't happened. So I am curious, Jamie, if in the future there is some other kind of disruptive technology that will bring some of the second-tier markets, for lack of a better term, which is where I tended to work because I get more autonomy than the first-tier markets, that will bring that visibility up, because it would be great if it would happen. My experiences to date is it hasn't, and so I'm not even sure what to keep looking for other than keeping my eye out and watching the trends. But that's what I found is actually working in the second-tier markets gives me much more autonomy, but to date it hasn't gone the same kind of visibility. Like the 5 things that I think I did in the 80s for the New York Times always got me much more visibility in New York than the stuff I did for the Inquirer, but the stuff I did for the Inquirer was stuff that won the awards and was the base of my career. So,
well, and I think it comes down to as well, like just industry specific storytelling. Like we're so insular, you know, a lot of times I think the photojournalism community is so insular. And okay, so Zach, this would be my like shout out for the week. Like I was just happily interviewed by the Candid Frame this week. And at the very end of the podcast, I talked about, you know, how my career changed from shooting for newspapers to shooting for nonprofits, because I found, first of all, I remember the first shoot I ever did for a nonprofit. And when I sent in the images, they called me up to say thank you for doing such a good job.
Wait, what?
Now, don't get me wrong. Like my editors at the New York Times were absolutely some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with. And I mean, Becky Leibowitz-Hanger is like one of the most brilliant photo editors I've ever, and she always said thank you. And so did Jeremiah Bogert. They were like my 2 predominant ones. But like, most journalism, clients I ever had, they would just be like, can you send us 3 more? Because we need to put a picture package on the web. Thanks. And like, that was it. And
I always have the problem, like, can you at least send me the link when you publish it? That's always the thing with my places where I'm like, can you at least tell me so that I can then promote it? Because like, or at least know, because that happened a lot actually with the Village Voice, is that they'd pay me, it wouldn't be a question, it would be whatever, and then I'd just keep refreshing and I'd send it and you're like, okay, I'll just check, and then one day I just happened to see it on the site and I'm like, oh cool, okay, wonder how long it's been there.
Well, and you got to imagine, like, every editor's putting out like a dozen stories a day.
No, obviously. I mean, but it's like, it's just like, I wish there was some automated thing. Anyway,
but I think like this is the thing where like we can look at other industries and be like, can we have quality storytelling in the journalistic, way that we would do it, with the ethics that we still keep using? And are we allowing our colleagues to do documentary outside of just a handful of newspapers that are still paying and still respecting us? Yeah. And instead, like, I mean, I wasn't kidding. Like, people in the podcast will hear, like, people called me a corporate shill. Someone literally said, like, you shouldn't be allowed to enter this into a contest because it's just a corporate shoot, because that's what nonprofit photography is. And somebody else said to me one time, like, some young lady recently said, how do you change your ethics when you're using, shooting for a nonprofit versus shooting, because obviously photojournalism has better ethics than anywhere else. And I was like, that's insane. That's like saying cheating on my husband doesn't count if I'm on vacation. Like, no, you're still cheating on your husband.
Let's hope he's not listening to this show.
Yeah, really.
It's like, no, I keep my same ethics when I'm shooting for any client. Like, why would I change that? Why is that? That's like, and this is a young woman who's just coming out of J school, who like firmly believes that the only way that you can do ethical storytelling is for a newspaper. And I just think that's insane. I think we need to open up our horizons a little bit. So that's my shout out for The Candid Frame. I think it's an amazing podcast. You should definitely listen, not just to mine, but to, I believe, Mr. Wells, you've been featured on that.
Yes, I've been on there too. And he does a great job. And I completely agree with that. If that's a closing point, which is we definitely have to be looking at other outlets. That is certainly true. Newspapers are one of many. They're not the only one. I mean, actually, my best client right now is a food website. And it's partly because they don't have a lot of money, and because they give me a ton of autonomy. And at this point in my life, autonomy is as much value as money, because I have a very large stock business, actually, Aurora Photos, and I'm with both Getty and Corbis, and been doing this a long, long time. So to have autonomy at this point is as important as anything else for me. And so I completely agree that looking into new markets is clearly the way for us to continue to grow as storytellers. In terms of what you said, I'm 100% behind that. And I don't know where it'll be and if I'll be around long enough to see where it goes, but that I am very curious about. Yeah. So did we get all our topics covered, by the way?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
I think we actually knocked through everything and then some. Because we actually been trying to keep it to an hour lately, but this went long and happily long. So because I think I tried to find a natural break, but there was we had no moments. It's fantastic. If David, you want to start? Just tell us where can people find your work?
Oh, sure. The website is davidhwells.com. If you don't put the H in there, you get a guy in Tennessee. He's very nice, but he's not a photographer. Yeah. Probably of more value is my free educational blog. It's called The Wells Point. And all my social media is under The Wells Point, which is sort of a double entendre for the website and also for an idea that I use in terms of how do you figure out the best time of day, which is around the Wells Point. So if you just Google anything around the Wells Point, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, it's all my social medias are around the Wells Point. And take a look.
Cool. Thank you. And Jamie?
You can, well, my website is woefully out of date, but currently being updated this month. So hopefully I'll have a brand new website. But most of the time you can find me on through momentworkshops.com, and you can learn all about our different workshops there. And then I'm also on Facebook under Jamie Rose, but you can find Momenta on there. And Momenta is also available on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook, all of that goodness. So feel free to reach out to me in any way possible. I love love talking about photography outside of this podcast as well.
And we'll post not only on the website aroundthelens.com, we'll post that survey. Please only take it if you're a photojournalist. Don't skew the results. Don't do it like the Donald Trump media accountability survey where everybody took it and screwed up his results. So we actually sent it out again. But anyway, so yes, if you're a working photojournalist, we'll post it up on the Facebook page as well. Because I think it's extraordinarily important. I took it, and it asked some really basic questions that I think a lot of the surveys that I've taken about journalism, about pay, and about everything didn't really kind of hit upon as well. I also liked specifically how the price points on how much money we're making are smaller, because a lot of times you see in those, do you make $25,000 to $50,000, and you're like, wait, that's I would
Big
love
range.
to. I'm in that market, but I'm on the low end of that. You're like, if I made 50, it would be a very different world. But anyway, I'm Zach D. Roberts. I'm the co-host of the Around the Lens podcast that you've been listening to this entire time. If you didn't know, you can find us at aroundthelens.com. And you can check out all of our social media there and watch past episodes where both Jamie and David have been guests previously. So thanks again. Thanks for coming on. And I'm sure we'll have you on again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Take care. Appreciate it.